McDonald. Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Penny. Mr. Salgado. Mr. Scroll. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Webster. Mr. Arena. Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita. Mrs. Crosby. Ms. Fellers. Thank you all. Chairman, that is 19 board members present, 1 board member absent.
Thank you. We do have a quorum this evening. Okay, under awards, presentations, public hearings, and public participation, we only have 1 presentation this evening. It's from the agent for the Winnebago County Trustee Program. If you guys would come forward, Mr. Sutter and Mr. Dunn.
Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Great to be back. Good to see everyone here tonight to give you give the board our annual agent for the trustee report. Happy to throw up the slides, please. And we can go to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you, Eric. I'll cover the first slide and maybe walk you through what it's saying, and then happy to turn it over to Eric to speak towards what we're looking forward to in 2024 and some of the properties that we've identified as longstanding issues and referencing it to the various county board districts. So here you'll see what is, 4 columns, most recently all the way to your left. Fiscal year 23 ending September 30th of 2023. I'll remind you that we came in halfway through the fiscal year in the first year, so that 4th column, fiscal year 20, is not a full year of operation. And we were very happy with the redemption level in fiscal year 23. Again, prior to our involvement, your past agent would keep 100% of all redemption interest. Redemption interest doesn't really have a cause of an effect to the auction process or the sales process. It really is a random event on how the market's looking and when people want to redeem their taxes. And so the fact that the program receives all interest now versus giving it to an agent that doesn't really procure that event, I think is really good government and has certainly helped the financial results for 23. I also want to commend Mr. Sutter and his team that while the county board in the IGA authorized up to $150,000 a mowing per year, Eric, I believe system-wide, you only spent $38,000 on mowing. One, that has to do with maybe a lack of rainfall in the summer. 2, strict management on the mowing contractors. And then 3, the success of really, and we can get into it, selling a lot of vacant parcels. Not parcels that have a structure on them, but true vacant land. I think we've done a yeoman's job in getting rid of a lot of vacant land, some that isn't even buildable, but giving it over to neighbors and making sure neighbors incorporate it into their ownership, since it is something that is enjoyed by a few of the residents. With that, the biggest anomaly year over year is line item 7, operation expenses. We had a high degree of operation expenses for the year. The reason for that is we had missed, again, and I think I've said this to all of you, and I warned you last time I was here, we had missed the October 2020 auction. It was something that we were not invited to, and it was during the negotiation, I think, with your former agent and our agent, and it was something that was shared with us that we shouldn't be there. And so because that auction was missed and there was no trustees agent there, basically all the properties that were up there were given a 3-year reboot. And so what happened is in fiscal year 22, we didn't have the normal skip tracing and service expenses and legal expenses that we would every year as these properties come into the program. And that's why on line item 7, fiscal year 22 is a very low amount. And then what happens is when you go through those expenses, 6 to 12 months later, you are at liberty to sell. So in fiscal year 23, we had nothing to sell. So the results you're seeing is a year where, you know, we still worked on vacant land, but as far as residential structures, we really had nothing. But we had to cover not just a traditional legal and skip tracing and service cost that we would typically cover. We had to cover 2 years' worth without any sale. We had to cover that year that we missed from 2020, but also cover the stuff that would naturally come into the program next year anyway. So I'll turn it over to Eric, and then we're happy to answer questions. But what you're seeing is a very nice financial setup to fiscal year 24, right? Starting October 1, is that we plan to have a lot of inventory in March and April that we will sell at very little legal cost, and that revenue will more than make up and more than cover the high degree of expenses on the legal side. And so that's the financial update, and moving to the next slide, I'll let Eric cover fiscal year 24.
Thank you. And looking ahead to 24, the trustee, as of now, is scheduled to acquire maybe up to 400 parcels. That number will vary as people redeem their taxes, like Michael mentioned, in between now and any point, likely in July. So scheduled maybe 300 lots, 100 structures. Obviously, that's going to go down a little, but that ratio is pretty much what we've seen. A couple things we're excited about in 2024 is we're looking at revamping the sales and auction process. Having it more look like an eBay traditional auction will be helpful to get more competitive bids, get more people in. We've got a list of, I think it's up to almost 2,000 users that have registered that are interested in the properties that we have through our sales system. So we've got a healthy amount of users for them, just trying to update that sales system a little bit. And then after the sale, the chairman's been creative, and we really thank his leadership in terms of getting these properties that essentially have been, you know, albatrosses for the county trustee program for years and years. They're little slivers in between land, not buildable, a square between somebody's backyards. We're really getting rid of those one by one at a time, and we look to continue that. We obviously offer everything up for a public sale, and then anything that doesn't sell to somebody at the sale, that's when we push it into that adjacent lot program. So that's been exciting to see that program get some properties out of the trustee program. And then lastly, I think Mr. Gilberti and Ms. Vaughn maybe have briefed you guys on the Tyler versus Hennepin County decision. So continuing working with them, and maybe it was Mr. Gilberti but there's some Supreme Court legislation that we're monitoring with our lawyer. We've met with Mr. Gilberti on a number of occasions on just how that will affect the trustee program going forward. So that's something that we want to make sure we're aware of and monitoring as we go along. The last slide is kind of our legacy properties, the big properties, and you'll see here the amount of funds that are being put in by a number of partners in some of these properties. Probably the biggest one at the moment is 1800 Broadway. It was a big, huge industrial building collapsing in on itself. The city used city funds to tear it down at the tune of $450,000. The U.S. EPA grant funds, Region 1 was awarded $1 million in brownfield cleanup or brownfield assessment funds, and we've set aside $110,000 just to do more testing on that site. It's an industrially zoned site in the city of Rockford, has some real redevelopment potential, but it's going to take, obviously, as you can see here, a lot of money to get to that. Similar story on 2630 Marshall. The city of Rockford especially has been working closely with the Illinois EPA on doing testing at that site. There's a commercial building there that likely has environmental concerns that we're trying to get to the bottom of. What's the story? What would be a potential demolition source if that's the way we go? But first we need to do that environmental testing that the Illinois EPA has done at their cost to date. The former Nelson Knitting Factory near South Main and Rockford, U.S. EPA funds through the city of Rockford was used to remove asbestos, so we're looking, the city really is looking for demolition funding on that property, but that's one that we know that has a lot of environmental concerns that hopefully we can get remedied going forward. Rock River School, again, asbestos removal, redevelopment partner, hopefully identified to demolish the building. On the county side, County Health Department used funds to demolish the Timberlane Trailer Park on Gold River Road. think there was maybe 20, 30 trailers on that property that's been cleaned up. There's a lien for the demolition on that property, so we're going to be working with the health department and the chairman's office to figure out best next use on that. And then lastly is kind of a residential lot on Navajo, but again, county health department demolition funds were used to demolish the dilapidated trailers. So we're going through these lists. These are kind of the structures that have been legacy properties in the trustee program that have a whole host of concerns with them. And as you can see here, I hope we make it evident that we're working with a number of partners and really leveraging all the funds we can, that whether state, local, or federal in a lot of cases, to get these properties cleaned up.
Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Setter. Just so that I understand what's here, line 3, it says revenue BM. What is BM?
So before maintenance, and then on line 5 after maintenance, per the IGA, we reserve the first $150,000 towards future maintenance expenses. That doesn't mean we spend $150, and if anything we don't spend, just obviously moves over as revenue. The order of operations and sequencing those lines, Mr. Arena, allows us to say if Mr. Setter's group only used $38,000 of the $150, the remaining $112,000 rolls into next year's revenue. So we're always making sure that there's a minimum of $150,000 in each fiscal year to cover unforeseen maintenance. But if you look at item number 4, or I'm sorry, pardon me, item number 6, he's never even gone over $100,000, let alone $150,000.
Right, so on line 4, where you say maintenance funding, that's a charge against the income for, is that correct?
Close, Mr. Arena. So if you look at number 8, that is, so fiscal year 23 is a hard year to look at, right? But if you look at past years, line 8 is deducted from the net operating income, right? So our net operating income is after mowing, after legal, right? What do we have left in redemption interest and sales? We immediately, before we split it between the agent and the taxing districts, we deduct $150,000 and then simply move it over into the next fiscal year. So it's a wash. In this year, you know, if you look at fiscal year 23 line 4, that $150,000 basically came from fiscal year 22, line 8.
Okay, so you've got program net, you have a negative $237,000?
That is correct.
So, I mean, who covered those expenses if the program is in the red for $237,000?
So R1 is floating cash flow until fiscal year 24, in which revenue comes in, and the revenue in fiscal year 24, because now we finally have 2 years worth of homes to sell versus last year having no homes to sell, we believe the revenue will make fiscal year 23 whole.
You paid from R1 money from other sources to cover the expenses for the...
So R1, we're not commingling funds, but R1, if there are cash flow constraints, R1 is floating that money, yes.
From other sources
Yes.
outside of this program. All right, thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Mr. Penny?
So on the adjacent land program, how is that handled? Are you reaching out to the individuals that are connected to that property one at a time? Or is it up to the property owners that are adjacent to those parcels to reach out to you?
Sure, great question. I'll let Eric answer that. There's, I would say, multiple angles of attack.
Okay.
Yeah, short answer is all those ways. We've, when it is a little sliver and it makes sense and it clearly is a part of a bigger parcel, we'll contact that person either by phone or mail and say, hey, there you've got a parcel, would you like that? A lot of times we're out mowing and our mowing contractors come back and say, hey, this person called or said they want to own the parcel, and then we have everything on our website. So a lot of time it's organic, just people looking and saying, hey, this is next door, it's mine, and we verify they're the adjacent property. So it's a little bit of outreach, it's a little bit of receptive feedback from people out there in the field, and just kind of pushing that from all different angles, I guess.
Okay. Then the only other thing is, I don't think any of your WinGIS links are working
Oh, we'll check into
on
that.
the site. So Just FYI.
Perfect. So on the property listing page, when it's supposed to link to Wingis, it is not? Good to know. Okay. So our software vendor just updated the software. I would guess anecdotally that that's the issue. We'll figure it out. Thank you.
Ms. Goro?
So Mr. Schultz and the county administrator have it, I believe. So yeah, happy to.
That all of us can have it to understand it better, just looking
Sure.
at it on the screen, and that's it. I'd like to see a little bit more of it. All the lots that are down on, the end of South Main, Kishwaukee Road, and the old, I even hate to say it, that trailer park down there. What do we do with all those lots? Have we got anyone who's gonna take over? I mean, we have streets of lots down there, and on the Rock River, is there anyone looking at those at all?
Are you talking about Black Hawk Island? I would defer to Mr. Dornbush on that. That's not our question to answer. I know he's been lead on that. We're here to assist and help with that, but I think that's a fair question for him. And I apologize, I assumed you all had handouts, so I apologize that you did not. Yep.
Did you want that question answered by Mr. Dornbush? Mr. Dornbush?
I'm sorry, Ms. Corral, can you repeat the question, please?
Speak to your mic.
I wanted to know on Black Hawk Island, have we done anything about all those vacant properties down there on the river? I know we only have a couple of trailers left, and no one can put new ones in there. But I also know there's a large amount of vacant lots in that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we did the buyout program about 10 years ago through some FEMA funds. Since then, we haven't actively did any more purchasing of properties down there. We applied for a grant a couple years after. We didn't receive it, but since then, we haven't done anything. We have reached out and asked now the R1 to not, anything that goes up for tax sale, to not put it back on tax sale, because the whole island is in the designated floodplain, which is determined by FEMA and IEMA. So eventually, it'd be nice to accumulate those, and then what the original plan was, even before my time, when they applied for the grant, because the grant was originally from 2007 flood, was that they could donate it or try to pass it off to like the park district or forest preserve and make that a public property for them. But no more development has occurred down there.
Even though there won't be any more development down there, will there be an EPA study on that land?
I'm not sure about that.
Thank you, Mr. Dornbush. Mr. Webster?
Back in the day, when Jim Hughes was in the office there, that's when the county took initiative then to buy as many of those lots as people were willing to part with. They were offered cash money to leave that island finally, because it had been flooded so many times, and rescue operations so many times cost a lot of money. When Chairman Christensen was here, he put Hughes on that job there to see if we couldn't acquire as many as we can. And yes, that was the final plan. If we got all of them out of there, just to revert that to natural space, parkland, open space, parkland, and so forth. That helps.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Any further questions for Mr. Dunn or Mr. Sutter? Mr. Arena?
Thank you for, let me ask one more question. The money that we had set aside for blight reduction, I think it was $700,000 last year, right? Wasn't this where the money was supposed to be used for blight reduction when we?
So are you talking about?
60, it was like what, 66% goes to the taxing district, 33% go to the
Yes, sir.
land bank for blight reduction?
Yes, sir.
Was it $700,000 that was transferred?
If I look at this, you're pretty close to 700 over those 3 fiscal years, yeah. There was none this year.
Right. Do you have an accounting of how that was spent and where the blight reduction was done?
We do. So, for instance, most recently, that $1 million that we secured for EPA brownfield assessment in Winnebago County, the cost to apply for it and the matching funds was used out of that fund. The R1 board manages that fund, and we've given them an accounting of how that money is spent.
get an accounting of?
Yeah, I can provide that. I mean,
Is there
again,
money left, I guess is the question, like if board members who have blight issues in their districts want to, have the chairman tap into it, that's the basis of the question.
yeah, and I would have to push back and simply say that it is not county money. Like, just as you would give that money to a Ballinger or a Meyer, that is money you're giving the agent for the agent's duties. That's important to stress because R1 is not charging for its labor, where the other agents do. R1 is doing this free of service. So in exchange for the sales system and all the work that 3 staff members are now working on, the exchange for that is it is potential capital for the land bank. And the land bank board has investment decisions on whether they want to use that capital. But ultimately, and Chairman Shirley knows as he sits on the executive committee, it is up to the mayors and the county chairs on how that money is spent. But that is, at one time, Mr. Rickard even suggested we change the language because he felt it was confusing. That is revenue to the agent. And so I'm happy as a government entity to share where our fund balance is. That's not a problem. But it's not something that is open for county direction. We'll definitely take suggestions because we want to improve every district. And then the other thing I would share is that other taxing districts have asked us about that money, rightfully, specifically 205 as the biggest taxing district. And our response to them was, there is that 67%. We've had that discussion with Mr. Dornbush even, is that you are getting 67% of interest, right? You are getting 67% from the program. Our encouragement is that a blight reduction program is made within the county using that 67% of basically free money to the general fund.
But I'm sure people are curious about where the money's going. So if you could just give us, where
Sure.
it was spent, what it was spent on.
Sure.
That would be useful information.
Great.
And then finally, it seems to me that court case is going to severely limit the funding that's available to the program, right? So the court case says that we cannot keep money in excess of what their tax debt was from the sale of the property.
So I'm not a lawyer, but the legal opinion that's been given by our attorney is this will, there's a number of directions the state of Illinois can go, and one is to reboot the entire tax sale process. But the legal opinion given to us that this will have far more ramification to the tax sale that the treasurer runs with tax buyers, less so to trustee programs. The second legal opinion that's been given, so it could put the tax buyer system out of business. The second legal opinion that I've been provided is that the class action lawsuits that are currently out there probably have zero merit and won't be something that is a long-term issue. The problem is, and again, I'm not an attorney, and you have outside counsel in the back room, and you have the state's attorney here. The legal advice I have been given is that for now, it is not settled case law. They have not prescribed case law based on the Supreme Court decision. That is how preliminary it is right now. To be safe, because there are class action lawsuits occurring, we are being asked to hold a reserve in future revenue on anything that is in surplus of the tax certificate value. We do not have access to the tax certificate value. So I think you're working with the treasurer's office to we would never get the tax certificate value. And so we are working on your behalf, again, free labor, to get the tax certificate values, compile them, create a pivot table, and make sure that when we sell a property, we can dispense that 67-33% scheme. We can dispense the basis in that property, but anything north of that tax certificate value, we will hold in escrow until pending litigation is resolved.
You're relying on that revenue to cover the $274,000 that you fronted the program, right?
So I'm relying on tax redemption interest.
Or so
And the
that's-
interest is really good revenue, right? And so the 67-33% split doesn't occur until we've netted out, again, legal cost, recording cost, and maintenance cost. And at that point, we will net out a 67-33 split. I think that still our processing, how much is our processing cost per property? So our sales volume has dictated that we're netting more than 700 per property, and your intrinsic cost to each property right now is running at about 700, which is cheap. It was cheaper than your former agent. I would propose, Mr. Arena, and I'm open to suggestion on this, is that based on the processing cost or your intrinsic cost, plus the fact that that gets added to the basis on whatever the tax certificate cost, like we get to add that value, right? That sales activity currently is still very hot in this market. We will have enough money where the problem won't be that we're covering our cost to process and our cost to pay back fiscal year 23. My problem is we will be escrowing too large of an amount, right? We will be, that's another discussion to make sure everybody's clear on, is we will be having a huge escrow balance that is waiting litigation that most legal minds in Illinois feel have no merit. And so at some point, I'm gonna have to create an accounting mechanism for how we then go backwards and look at everything that exceeded that basis cost and distribute it in a 6733. It's gonna be a lot of work.
So this year, the taxing district's got no money. Next year, is it likely they also will not get any money?
No, I think they will, but they're not gonna
They'll
get
pay
what
off
they
your,
should.
the debt to you, and they'll get money, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to have the auction. I would suggest based on, I think on his report, Eric, 100 homes? Yeah, on 100 homes and the other activities we're doing, and the redemption interest, which is, what's been redemption interest per month? But 20? Yeah, we're receiving $20,000 redemption interest a month. So, I mean, right there, that's 240. So I do believe that the program's healthy. It's not about the ledger. I mean, it is, and you have a fiscal responsibility to make sure it is. But this is about returning a lot of properties that hadn't paid property taxes for years in disadvantaged neighborhoods that have avoided reinvestment and getting reinvestment. I mean, the real story here is the amount of properties that have been returned to private sector hands that are paying property taxes, and the amount of maintenance and construction that has gone into all of them. We have, I'm proud to say that, you know, we've been central in the discussions with the feds and the states on bringing Stellantis back to Belvedere. Their projected headcount between now and 2027 is very large. Where's anyone gonna live? We have almost full occupancy, right? So I think that the value in the trustee program is without creating more subdivisions, which we probably still need to do, but using the infrastructure government is already subsidizing and paying for, we're bringing density back in a healthy, solid way, back to every block of every neighborhood in McChesney, Rockford, you name it. So I think the real success of this program isn't the ledger, although I think we're doing a great job on it. The real success is that we're creating housing inventory at a time that we have a workforce that's not coming to our community, not because of job, but because they don't like their options on housing. And so it is R1, and R1's board weighed in on this with Chairman Shirley back in December, that they want R1 to take a lead role as an agency for what the regional housing capacity study might be. You have 5,000 well-paid employees coming here in the next 3 years. That's 5,000 rooftops, 5,000 families. Where are they gonna live? And so that's really kind of what's driving us, but I am committed to running this program at very little cost, and I'm committed to making sure that every taxing district gets, you know, back taxes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and just to Mr. Arena's point, as it pertains to that federal lawsuit, that Supreme Court decision, I've instructed and directed on advice from counsel that the agent put in escrow those overages and go back 3 years, I believe it is, and take a look at how many of those,
Yeah.
take a look-see at it. Right. This
So-
way, we're prepared in the event we need to react soon on those lawsuits. Okay. Ms. Gorel?
As I drive around on the northwest end of Rockford, which is Tim's area and my area, I see more than 100 homes in stress, they're distressed, they're terrible. Now, those things don't ever get on your list, do they?
So we only have two, well, we have more than two, but predominantly we have two methods for coming in as an intervention role on housing. One is the land bank, which is a 5-county entity at this point. So over 5 counties, we have quite possibly the largest land bank tied with South Suburban Cook County in Illinois. It's a very successful land bank. And in that case, I can take a property that is 2 years tax delinquent, which is less time than a trustee program, right? It only has to be 2 years tax delinquent. And in this case in Winnebago, a 17th Circuit judge would have to say that it is abandoned. And abandoned does not mean vacant. It means that there is no owner up and down the chain that says, this is mine. And all that owner has to do is appear upon 2 different services in court and simply say present. And in that case, the property is not abandoned, even though it's vacant. If it's abandoned and nobody responds to 2 services, and it's over 2 years tax delinquent, the land bank gets a judicial deed from the court, which provides new, free, clear, marketable title. That is so that, Board Member Gorel, that is one channel I have to go in and say, neighbors are complaining, city council members complaining. This has happened in Belvedere multiple times. What are we doing? This home hasn't paid property taxes for 12 years. I can go in, and I would prefer going in as a land bank to do that because it's quicker and it's less blight being created because it's not staying there winter after winter with deferred maintenance. The second avenue that every county has, and again, we continue to be one of the only counties in the state that does online auctions, and that is the trustee program. And in that case, those are properties that have to go through the tax sale process, have to sit there for 3 years, right? And pretty much no tax buyer wants to go to deed on them. I'm being simplistic, but generally speaking, a tax buyer doesn't even want to go to deed on it. And in that case, by default, it goes to the county trustee program. We're proud to be the agent, not just for Winnebago County, but for Boone County. And so as agent, it is our job to try to find the highest price possible. Mr. Arena and I have had a lot of discussions about this. In that case, we go with the highest buyer. We had spoken about that in the original IGA. It's no longer present. In the land bank, we have the authority to pick and choose who the best buyer is. For the trustee program, we go for top dollar, and that's what we have done. And so in that case, somebody comes to the auction and they say, hey, I beat you by $5, it's my property. And so those are the 2 ways I can do something with a property. There are discussions at times where somebody might be facing foreclosure and they can do a deed in lieu of foreclosure to us. There are times where people might want to donate something to us. We're willing to take that on, but this is not an eminent domain mechanism, right? We don't interfere with private property rights. I hope that helps share what we can and can't do.
I know, everybody's talking about the house shortage we have here. You're talking about all new employees coming to Rockford, and we need housing. What are we gonna do with the housing that's just sitting there destroying itself?
So it's really a free market principle, right? And it's a free market phenomenon in that you need the land values and the sales volumes to drive prices up so much that, you know, somebody feels that, okay, this is a problem for me, I'm just gonna sell it to somebody that can really invest in it. We're doing that with the trustee program, we're doing that with the land bank, we're showing that there's investors fighting over properties, right? We're getting multiple bids. And really, you have to allow that kind of sales cycle where people can start getting appraisals that couldn't before. We have comps now, and we're, again, growing EAV, right? We've generated $6 million of EAV that now puts less pressure on the tax rate, right? We're growing EAV. So you get the EAV benefit, but you also get the benefit that now people can refinance their mortgage, people can get an appraisal done because there's a comp where there wasn't before. It's a tricky thing for sure, and I don't have a silver bullet, but you really have to trust that the market's inflation, which is another issue, it's an issue with regentrification, there's other issues at play there, but you have to hope that the market drives prices up so high that somebody that maybe has a house that's too costly to maintain says, you know what, I'm just gonna sell it. But I'm never going to be able to come in and deal with personal property rights.
Okay, thank you.
We need some different programs too to get rid of those houses, either down them or fix them up. And we don't have what we used to call chodos out there looking to rehab houses. We don't have that opportunity anymore, and that's something we probably, as a county and as a city, should be looking at to encourage way to get started?
So often it's punitive, and sometimes landlords don't care for it, but, you know, it also starts with how you're doing code enforcement, right? It also starts there. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Dunn or Mr. Setter? Trustee program? All right, very good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. May I entertain a motion to approve the November 30th, 2023 minutes, lay over the December 14th, 2023 minutes. We have a motion by Mr. Guevara and a second by Mr. Thompson. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All right, hearing none, are there any board members opposed to the approval and lay over those minutes? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Next is the consent agenda. May I entertain a motion to approve the raffle report and the auditor's report? We have Mr. Thompson motions, Mr. Guevara seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on the raffle report or the auditor's report? Very good. Any board member opposed to the raffle report or the auditor's report? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. We do not have any appointments to read in this evening. We'll move on to the reports of standing committees. The first is the Finance Committee by Mr. John Butita. Thank you, Mr. Butita. Next is Zoning Committee, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Your zoning committee has but one item on the agenda, and this is for the first reading. It's Z0423. It's a map amendment to rezone 2.41 acres from RA to RA, the rural district. Anyway, so this came with the recommendation of approval, unanimous approval by Zoning Board of Appeals and by Zoning Committee. So it's in for first reading, but if there's no objection, I'd like to suspend rules on this one.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Webster. Do we have a second by Mr. Thompson, Mr. Guevara? Are there any board members opposed to the suspension of rules this evening? Very good.
Okay, I would
Rules
move
are
to approve.
suspended. Motion by Mr. Webster to approve. Mr. Guevara seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on this map amendment this evening? All right, hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this map amendment this evening? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Webster.
Great, thank you. Tuesday, February 13th, 2024 is the next meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and tentatively, we follow that Wednesday, February 21st. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next is Economic Development Committee by Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two resolutions tonight. The first resolution is resolution granting authority to the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute the documents necessary to complete a loan for $65,000 from the revolving loan fund to XL Foam and Packaging LLC, and I so move for its adoption.
Moved by Mr. Sweeney, second by Ms. Hansert. Is there any discussion, Mr. Sweeney?
Not for me.
Any board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Sweeney.
And then our next and final item is a resolution granting authority to the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute the documents necessary to complete a loan for $50,000 from the revolving loan fund to Rogue Event Rentals LLC, and I so move for its adoption.
Moved by Mr. Sweeney, second by Ms. Hansert. Is there any discussion, Mr. Sweeney?
No, sir.
Any board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Sweeney.
That concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Next up is the Operation Administrative Committee by Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have four items for this evening. The first is a resolution authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding for information technology support services for the Northern Illinois Training Advisory Board, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, seconded by Mr. Guevara. Any discussion, Mr. McDonald?
No, sir.
Any board member discussion on this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement for information technology support services between the County of Winnebago, Illinois, and the Rockford Housing Authority, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Huffman. Is there any discussion, Mr. McDonald?
No, sir.
Any board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a resolution awarding fence repair at Juvenile Detention Center using CIP PSST 2023 funds, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. McCarthy. Any board member discussion on this item? Hearing none, or is there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our final item is a resolution awarding tile and grout repairs at Juvenile Detention Center using CIP PSST 2023 funds, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Huffman. Is there any discussion on this item this evening? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Next is the Public Works Committee. Tonight will be Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best in the absence of Mr. Tassoni. The first item on the agenda is 23040. It's an ordinance establishing a speed zone on Cunningham Road from Lansom Drive to Falconer Road. There's no cost on this, and I would move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Webster, and we have a second by Mr. Booker. Is there any discussion, Mr. Webster, on this?
Not for me.
Any board member discussion on this ordinance? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this ordinance? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. The next item is 23-041, resolution authorizing an annual professional services agreement with Geocon Professional Services for geotechnical engineering, materials engineering, testing, and other related services. And the cost on this is $125,000, and this is something we do annually. Would move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Webster. We have a second by Mr. Thompson and Ms. Crosby. Is there any board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none. Are any board members opposed to approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. The next one is 23-042, resolution authorizing an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between Winnebago County and Region 1 Planning Council for implementation of a Section 319 U.S. EPA grant. The cost on this is $57,507, but it's 100% reimbursable. And I would move.
Moved by Mr. Webster, and we have a second by Mr. McCarthy. Is there any discussion? Board members on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. Moving along, the next item is 23-043, a resolution permitting the relocation of a right-in, right-out access on Perryville Road and granting full access to Nimps Road east of Perryville Road. And I would move on that as well.
Motion by Mr. Webster. We have a second by Mr. Gaveras. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to the approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Webster.
Wow, that was easy on me. Thank you.
All right, good job, Mr. Webster. All right, we'll move on to the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee. Mr. Brad Lindmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First resolution is a resolution authorizing the use of propertyroom.com to auction items stored in evidence that have been approved to be auctioned or destroyed, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Lindmark. Do we have a second? Mr. Guevara, Mr. Thompson. Any discussion, Mr. Lindmark?
No, sir.
Any board member discussion on this resolution? Very good. And there are board members opposed to the approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Lindmark.
Next resolution is authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the County of Winnebago, Illinois, and the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Lindmark, seconded by Mr. Hoffman and Mr. McCarthy. Is there any discussion, Mr. Lindmark?
No, sir.
Board member discussion on this resolution? Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Lindmark.
We also have a resolution authorizing independent contractor agreement for services with Tommy Meeks as a Winnebago County Community Liaison, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Lindmark. We have a second by Mr. Webster. Any discussion, Mr. Lindmark?
No, sir.
Mr. Neighbors, discussion.
Did we establish what the funding source is for this
None of that changed, whatever it was from before.
still public safety sales tax?
Yes, sir.
Any further board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to the approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Lindmark.
We have a resolution authorizing the agreement between the County of Winnebago, Illinois, and the 17th Judicial Circuit Court and Remedies Renewing Lives Incorporated, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Lindmark, second by Ms. Hanser. Is there any board member discussion on this resolution? Mr. Neighbors.
Same goes for this one, too.
For this one, yes, sir.
Very good. Any other further board member discussion on this resolution? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the approval of this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Lindmark.
The final resolution is authorizing agreement between the County of Winnebago, Illinois, and Rosecrans Incorporated for court-ordered assessments programs, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Lindmark. Is there a second? We have a second by Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Guevara and Ms. Gorel. Board member discussion. Mr. Neighbors.
And this one as well, public safety sales tax?
Until October, yes.
Further board member discussion. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there was conversation about this being the last year. I mean, is it, you just mentioned until October.
Yes.
So this one, it's written in there that it only goes to October. Are the other ones for longer periods of time or self-renewing?
All three are until October,
Okay, and then,
and we'll be looking for alternative sourcing areas for Rosecrans in the future.
for this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Board member discussion. Hearing none. Are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. Mr. Lindmark.
That concludes the report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lindmark. Moving on to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before the board this evening? None. New business. Per county board rules, passage will require a suspension of the board rules. All right, we have a resolution awarding the state lobbyist and consulting services. It's before you. We have a motion. Is that a motion, Mr. Salgado?
Lobbyist resolution.
We have a motion by Mr. Salgado to approve the resolution.
Got to suspend.
Okay, we have a
move to
motion to suspend by Mr. Salgado. Do we have a second by Mr. Guevara? Are there any board members opposed to the suspension of rules? No? Okay, very good. Rules are suspended. Move to approve by Mr. Salgado, second by Ms. Fellers. Brain. It happens once in a while. It's the age. Ms. Feller, second that motion. Is there any board member discussion on the resolution awarding the state lobbyist?
If I may speak to it, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So just everybody understands, the lobbyist committee met, and there was 4 vendors that, for the state lobbying committee, Phelps Berry, McGuire Woods, Public Sector, Light Strategies. Out of those conversations, Phelps Berry came in the highest score overall, based on their presentation and obviously their qualifications. So tonight, we bring it because we need to get this going in order for them to start working on us to submittal for some of the state legislation items as a placeholder. So they will be doing that for us. The contract right now, as it stands, so everybody knows, it's $7,000 a month. It's a 30-day all essentially canceling the contract. It's for 1 year, starting January 15th to January 14 of 2025. So just so everybody's clear on that, and that gives you authority, Mr. Chairman, to sign off on that. So that's what this resolution's about.
All right, thank you, Mr. Salgado. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Webster?
What was the cost to the county?
$7,000 a month.
$7,000
Yep,
a month?
yep.
And duration?
Here.
Here. Can we end that relationship at any time? 30 days. $7,000.
Any further questions? Ms. Crosby?
Just for clarification, I thought we had hired Bustos' firm.
That was for the federal lobbyist.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Mr. Webster is in opposition. Any other board members? Very good. Please cast yes for all members, all other members present.
Just real quick, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Salgado.
Just have people sign this before they leave that are part of the committee.
Yep, and I want to thank the Legislative and Lobbying Committee and all their work between hiring the federal lobbyists and the state lobbyists. Thank you. Next is the announcements and communications. Clerk Gamow.
Thank you, Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Very good. Mr. McCarthy, were you signaling to speak?
Well, yes, briefly, can we go back to the topic? I just have a
Oh,
question.
you do? Okay,
Yeah, it's just more of a clarification.
please.
Because, Mr. Salgado, so let's say after 30 days or 60 days, something happens to this person, or this person is not performing to our level, what's our backup plan? Is there a contingency or someone else or somewhere else that we could go to?
At that point in time, we will just open up the process again, we'll bring it to the county board to make the decision, whether we want to stomach another one. As Mr. Webster has asked, we've had one bad taste in the mouth, so we would have to bring it back to the committee, just to make sure we get recommendation, whether we want to open it up to anyone else, or is it, we're just going to continue with our lobbyist from that perspective. So, yeah, it's going to be a county board decision from that perspective, and with the direction to the lobbyist committee to address that.
Thank you. Any other announcements, communications from the county board members, staff, anything? All right, so next we have we need a motion to go into closed session. Can I entertain a motion to go into closed session by Mr. Guevara? Is there a second? By Mr. Sweeney? Is that a roll call? Clerk, come out, can you please call a roll?
Mr. Guevara? Yes. Ms. Hansard? Yes. Mr. Hoffman? Yes. Mr. Lindmark? Mr. McCarthy? Yes. Mr. McDonald? Yes. Mr. Neighbors? Yes. Mr. Penny? Yes. Mr. Salgado? Yes. Mr. Scroll? Yes. Mr. Sweeney? Yes. Mr. Thompson? Yes. Mr. Webster? Yes. Mr. Arena? Yes. Mr. Booker? Yes. Mr. Butita? Yes. Mrs. Crosby? Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel. Yes. Thank you all. That's 19 yes and 1 board member absent.
All right, the motion has been approved. We're going into closed session. All right. Can I entertain a motion to go back into open session, please? Mr.